Hi, everybody. This is Nasser Rodriguez with Comic Arts San Antonio, CASA for short, and we're the only convention in San Antonio that focuses on comic book writers and artists. We've got one of those comic book creators with us today who will be joining us on October 5th, Carl Braun with Studio Aries. How you doing, Carl?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing good, man. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, I appreciate you having me and doing these creator interviews. I think it's really awesome.
Thanks, man. Well, like I said, just trying to get people to know you a little bit more, know your work. Um,
Yeah.
but with these interviews, before we get to your work, what I've been doing is we kind of go back to the beginning and how your love of comics started. So,
All right.
have you always been a comic book reader, a comic book fan?
So to get back to the beginning of me and my love affair with comics, we've got to go back to the 70s.
Okay.
And that's when I was a kid and a little known movie called Star Wars came out.
Yeah, I think I've heard of it.
And
Yeah.
and back then, um, although VHS existed, it wasn't commonplace in people's homes. You
Yeah.
still had a few more years for that. But what they would do, well, Marvel used to do it. I don't know about other companies, but they would do these official movie adaptations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember having the movie adaptation for Star Wars was 6 issues, and I had all of those, and it was that awesome like newsprint rag paper,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and over the years I lost those original six. I wish I
Mhm.
still had them, but what I do have are these special editions,
Oh
and these
man,
are these
that's
are
cool.
oversized, and
Yeah,
this one was published in 1977.
that's cool, man.
Yeah, and so what they did, this is a collection of the first 3 issues,
Okay.
and then this one is book two, and this is a collection of issues 4 through 6.
That's awesome. So yeah, instead of being able to just pop in the movie and watch it again, you would read them again, huh?
Right. Yeah, you
Okay.
put the John Williams vinyl record on and
Yeah.
sit there and flip through the pages, and then it just start that's my love affair. That's the
Yeah.
beginning of me doing comics, and from there I remember always being a Captain America and Spider-Man fan. So,
Okay.
slowly but surely I started collecting comics.
Yeah. Yeah. So when was the do you remember when was the first time that you kind of like I guess when it like really grabbed you when like so it's 70s, are you reading the like Ross Andrews Spider-Man stuff, Gil Kane? Like do you remember which artists or really caught your imagination?
So back then when I first started, I was collecting the Star Wars series.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember like on Sundays, after we're driving home from church, and my parents always stopped at HEB,
Hmm.
and HEB had the newsstand rack, and
That's
I
cool.
would dig until I could find a copy of Star Wars, and then it was like, hey, Dad, instead of allowance, let me get the Star Wars comic, and Dad
Yeah.
throw it in the cart. So, but yeah, that's seeing that rack and seeing what else was available on it, like Spider-Man and Captain America, if I could get an extra book or two.
Yeah.
But back then I guess I didn't really pay attention to like who was writing and who was drawing,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Yeah,
it was
most of
more
us
about.
we pick it up later on and then you go
Yeah,
back and you're like, "Oh, okay, that was so and
yeah,
so."
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So
So
were you a kid that was always drawing and always coming up with stories?
yeah, I was always you know not always coming up with stories in the beginning, but
Mhm.
when I was 9 years old, I drew a picture of the family dog, the pet,
Okay.
and walked that into the living room and showed it to my mom. And apparently, she and my dad had a conversation a little later and discussed getting art lessons for me.
Okay.
And I remember my first official art teacher's name, Mrs. Donahoe,
Okay.
and she used to teach out of this back room in her house, and she had a studio set up. It was awesome, and I loved it. So once a week on Wednesday nights, I was headed over to Mrs. Donahoe's house
Yeah.
for oil painting. We did some watercoloring, but it was
Yeah, yeah.
that was the start of
That's
art
cool.
instruction and art lessons. Yeah,
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 so from the very beginning, your parents encouraged this, right? Because while I've been
Absolutely.
doing some of these interviews, like unfortunately, some of the people I've talked to, I hear about like, yeah, my teachers always told me not to do this, or I was always discouraged because I was told this couldn't be a career and that stuff. But it's really awesome
Yeah.
that your parents were encouraging you, huh?
Yeah, they were actually very encouraging, and my dad was an educator
Mhm.
and a band director for decades. And at this time he was still a band director. He later went on to be, like a vice principal and then a principal. So he
Mhm.
got into administration, but we had a love of arts, particularly music, but that translated into visual medium very easily for me.
Yeah.
And so back to the question on when did I start working on stories. It wasn't until, like, I thought, oh, I love these comics, well, maybe I can create my own comic. And then
Yeah.
that's where kind of the light bulb started to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
off as I got a little bit older.
Do
So
you remember around what age that was that that light bulb went off?
yeah, you know what, it was in junior high. And
Okay, pretty early on
so
still.
yeah, my buddies and I, we would sit around and like I said, we would be looking at comics, X-Men and all the popular stuff. And then it was me sitting there drawing something, and then we would start talking about it, and it's like, let's do our own, or maybe you should do a book, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I was 13 years old in eighth grade, and well, here I can show you it.
Oh, you've got
This
some of
is
your original
Oh
drawing
yeah,
stuff?
dude, this is
That's
almost
awesome.
cringeworthy, but now keep in mind this is 41 years old. So this is the
Dude,
Red
that is so
Falcon.
cool.
And at the top there, it says CB Comics Group 83.
Yep.
And the 25 cents, I wasn't selling it. This is the only copy, but it's probably not coming through. But you can see that this is like notebook paper. It's got the
Yeah.
hole
Yeah, see
punches,
the
and it's got
whole.
it's got the blue lines on it.
That's cool that
But
you were
this,
able to keep that. And unfortunately, so
yeah,
many of us have like lost those early drawings and stuff, you know?
yeah, and I've got well, here, check this out. I've got that this was a 5-issue miniseries. So, we've got book two, and I don't know how my friends would pass these around. So it's great that the teachers never took them up, because they would read it in class and then
Yeah, yeah.
give it back to me. And then in the back was like an ad for the next issue.
Wow, man.
Yeah. So here's some more of that. And then here's the final issue of Freedom Falcons. And then, like I said, Captain America, and I also like Daredevil. So you can
Okay.
see some Captain
Captain
America and
Freedom.
Captain Freedom. Come on.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've got 3 issues of Captain Freedom.
That's
And
great.
yeah, so these are like double Mylard and everything. I don't ever bring them out, but one of these days, like the current book that I'm working on, which I'm sure we'll get to, I
Mhm.
want to I want to produce like a hardcover slipped case, what a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of people call absolute editions,
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah.
are on that shelf there. But I'm gonna produce something like that for this current book, and I want to show, like, I want to photograph them or
Yeah.
scan them,
Put
whatever
that in
works
the back,
better.
like
Yeah,
the
put that in
special
the back,
material. That's
like
cool.
like where it started and how's it
Hmm.
going, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
So that was, you said that was middle school, like around 13 years old, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So,
13, 14. And
so,
then of course that's when you eighth grade, you turn 14, and then for most people, and then that's where you shift into high school.
yeah, so that's what I was going to ask about that during some of these interviews, and I think it was my own story too, that like there's some point where you kind of stop reading comics because like you get busy with girls and your first job and driving and all this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So, did that happen to you, or did you continue reading and drawing, or?
I mean, I did, um, but I will say there was a dip, and
Mhm.
it's like I had a part-time job after school, and I had a my first car,
Mhm.
and and all that kind of stuff. So you start growing up a little bit, and
Yeah.
you start moving on to different things. But I never left comics.
Okay.
One of my favorite books in high school, I really got into sci-fi,
Okay.
and there was a book called Alien Legion.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
remember that.
yeah, oh man, I love Alien Legion still to this day.
Okay.
And I hear they're working on a movie, which I think would be amazing. But
Yeah.
maybe I'm I'm lonely man on the island, but somebody's putting up money for it, so
Yeah.
I hope it comes through.
Okay, so when there was a dip in your kind of your comic book reading and stuff, do you remember what it was that brought you back?
Um, well, I mean, to some degree, I never really like got past it, and
Okay.
even though I wasn't like actively collecting,
Mhm.
every time we came into San, because I grew up in Floresville, which is a
Okay.
little town about 30 minutes south of San Antonio, and every time we would come into town, we used to go to we used to love Windsor Mall,
Yeah.
Windsor and North Star. We would
Yeah,
either one of
yeah.
those, but the reason we went to Windsor in part was because there was a comic store across the street called the Dungeon,
Yes.
and
Oh my
yeah,
goodness, man. I used to go to the dungeon that was on Fredericksburg.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
And you for me, you hear the phrase all the time, kid in a candy store. And I
Hmm.
would walk in there and it was just wall to wall comic books. And then I got exposed to Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah, yeah.
and that started a love affair of gaming,
Hmm.
and it was just an incredible place that, I had never seen anything like that. That was my first experience with a comic book
Yeah.
store. And then you start getting pulled back into
Yeah.
it, and I don't know, it's just awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's cool that you brought up the dungeon kind of brought you into gaming too, because
Yeah,
one of the things that you do now, in addition to comics, is you do your own card games.
I
So
do. Yep.
so even back then, were you also we saw you were making your own comics. Were you thinking about your own games back then too?
Yeah, that was something that again, my buddies and I, we would get together, and we'd play for a little bit, and then we'd be like, well, what would be cool? This is like dragons and stuff, or what if there was a sci-fi game? And then, there was no internet, so you couldn't just Google and say, hey, is there
Yeah.
and then we discovered there was one called Star Frontiers.
Yeah.
And so we'd go buy that when we could, and we'd start reading the rules, and but the whole time that it's just the gears were turning, and
Yeah.
I kept thinking, it'd be fun to be a comic book artist, but it'd be fun to work in gaming, and it
Yeah.
was just, which path are you going to take,
Yeah.
kind of
Well,
thing.
that's cool. As a independent creator doing it yourself, you could just do them both, whatever you feel
Yeah,
like doing. So, all right, cool,
yeah,
man. So yeah, so then actually then now I'm curious. So you never really kind of left comics. Maybe there was a dip,
right,
but you were always checking out what was coming out and reading things. So when
yeah.
did it finally click in your head that you're gonna make like your first like serious like all out comic project, I guess?
So I was in high school, and what's crazy is I never took an art class in in school until I got into high school.
Yeah, yeah.
And the first teacher I had, was her name was Miss Calvert,
Mhm.
and she was very encouraging, and could appreciate the art form of comics, and
That's
and
good.
uh, we didn't always talk about graphic novels back then, but it was the single issue kind of floppy
Yeah.
newsprint. And I guess a lot of people saw that as something that was disposable, but for me it was like, it was like this thing to aspire to.
Hmm.
And so she was very encouraging, but she said, well, you know, we're going to do ceramics, and we're going to do, pottery and all this other stuff in art class. So, what are you doing to like pursue this and get better in this endeavor? Because she could see, the passion.
Yeah.
And, the more we talked about it, it was, you need to find like some way to get this particular instruction, like study anatomy, study, muscle and skeleton and all that,
Hmm.
like parts of the body.
Yeah.
And so that's when I discovered a book that I say changed my
Oh,
life:
wow. Okay. Yeah, I
How to
think,
Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
yeah, definitely.
And there's a lot of artists working today that, give a lot of credit to this book.
Yeah.
And this book right here is what, it took my skill level, and it's just like, like the speedometer, it went
Hmm.
from slow and idle to, all right, we're redlining the engine now.
Yeah.
And and that's when things started to click and make sense. And I didn't have to, it's like, well, let me look at something and draw it. This is when my imagination can open up, and I would say, I'm gonna draw these two guys fighting, and
Yeah.
and whatever I could imagine,
Yeah.
I could picture it based on how this book taught me to draw and a lot of the skill sets that it gave me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's an
and
important step there, because I remember, I was taking um art classes in middle school, high school and stuff, and exactly like you
yeah,
said, like I was actually pretty good at looking at something and recreating
yeah,
it, but I just didn't have that next step of like coming up with the imagination for what I wanted to do,
yeah,
And
yeah. Yeah, so that was huge for me. And then I actually started working on some comic titles in high school,
mhm.
but unfortunately, those other things that you mentioned, like girls and draw,
Uh-huh.
and your first car and your first job
Yeah.
and
They start
grades
taking
and
all
study.
your
Yeah, they
time,
started
yeah.
taking, so
Okay.
my free time became next to nothing.
Yeah.
And so and then what it did do is it gave me an absolute respect for the amount of time it takes to create a book.
Yeah.
When you're looking at a comic book sitting on a table in front of a person, there is countless hours on the backside of that book,
Yeah.
that or on the front side of it, I should say, where these people not only they had the idea, but then they had to write the story, and then they had to
Mhm.
draw, figure out the camera angles and layouts. And if you see one picture on a page, there's probably five or six others where they worked out the
Mhm.
composition and the layout.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
and then
especially
they
with
said,
like CASA, like we have a bunch of independent creators. So a lot of y'all are the writers, the artists, the inker, the like everything.
Yeah, and that's my case as well.
Yeah.
The uh the, well i I don't want to jump too far ahead because I'm kind of building up to when I got to college.
Well, yeah, let's get to it. So
Yeah,
so
you want
what
to get
what
to
work
it?
was that? Yeah.
So when I got to college, and I cringe when I look at some of the artwork, but this right here is a book I did, and it's called BMX. So I
Okay.
was big time into BMX racing and
Uh-huh.
trick riding and stuff in the 80s. But that's Bad Mr. X.
Nice.
And it's this little story that I create, and total wraparound cover, man.
Wow.
Wraparound cover, and then you can see that's a
Oh,
that's a
cool.
picture of me and a buddy. We're standing in front of all the original art. That was the
That's
night we finished. Um, but this was actually for a printing project.
okay.
And what I had learned in college was that I'm very deadline oriented.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I have deadlines I can work to, then I can back plan it and work to achieving a goal.
Okay.
And so at the beginning of the semester, the professor said, "Hey, you have to tell me what your final project is going to be for this printing class." And and there's all various different forms of printing, but this was like electric machines that print multiple copies and stuff. And I was like, all right, this is it. I'm going to print a comic book. I said
Cool.
it's going to be 24 pages, black and white, with a two-color cover.
Yeah.
And he says, do you understand how ambitious that is? And I said, yeah. I said, yes, I do. But this is something that I had already been working on it for a while, but having that end of semester deadline, really, kind of drove it home.
Yeah.
And so, like you were saying, I wrote it, I drew it, I inked it, I lettered it.
Whew.
Um, I had a little bit of help from two other guys with the inking,
Hmm.
but one guy, he did 3 pages, and remember, it's 24 pages.
Yeah.
And then another buddy of mine, he did like three or four. So for
Yeah.
the most part, I mean, I did everything. Then I photographed the art. I burned the printing plates. I put the plates on the printing press,
Wow, man.
loaded the paper, turned the press
Yeah.
on, and they're printing. And
Yeah.
then I had to, and you have to do it in print production, what they call printer spreads. So
Yeah.
you don't just go in order. You got to figure all that out, and then I'd print the other side and then I'm folding them. And the only thing I didn't do was when I took it to this professional printer in San Marcos, and they saddle stitched it, and then they trimmed what they call the face of the book, which is
Yeah.
this outer edge here.
Okay.
So and it gave it a much nicer presentation.
Wow,
And then
man. I'm hoping you got a
well,
good grade on that project.
oh, I got an A in the class.
All
I
right.
was happy. But the time that I was in, when I went, it was Southwest Texas State. Now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Texas
Hmm.
Texas State. So when I was there, um, this husband and wife, Brian and Diane Stewart, they opened up Comic Relief off of Aquarena Springs, and
Okay.
that store is still there to this day.
Oh, cool.
And he let me put copies of Bad Mr. X in his store, and
Yeah.
he sold them for $1. And because I printed 100 copies of it,
Yeah.
and for the most part, I just gave them away to friends and family. But
Yeah.
he probably had 20 copies that he ended up selling for me, which
That's
I thought
great.
was awesome. I was just like,
Yeah. Look at
wow,
that. At that point,
yeah,
you're a professional now, right? When
yeah, yeah,
so, well, that's cool, man. That's great to hear about that. But definitely, I want to get into your current work that now that you're working on. So, why don't we talk about some of the stuff you'll be bringing to Casa? So, you were with us last year, and I
right,
remember, I think I came across your work on Instagram, maybe, and what instantly grabbed me was seals. And
right.
I saw the tagline that was GI Joe meets Ninja
Ninja
Turtles.
Turtles. That's it right
Yeah,
there.
that
That's what I
is
call
that is a great
it.
elevator pitch right there, man. So,
Exactly. That's the elevator pitch. Yeah.
so other
So,
than a little bit, give us a little more information on seals and what will we be seeing of seals at Casa this year?
all right. So, Seals, as it currently stands, it's a 4-issue miniseries.
Okay.
And I took Navy SEALs. It normally stands for sea, air, and land. They
Mhm.
can engage the enemy in the air, on land, and in the sea. What I did was I made it surveillance, extraction, and live capture specialists.
Okay.
So because of their mutation, they are now the elite team that can go in and rescue high value targets or high value enemies. They go in, they get them, and they can guarantee a live capture extraction.
Okay.
Um, and this was born out of a fascination with all military special forces,
Mhm.
and of course my love for GI Joe comics and for
That's what I was
Ninja
going to
Turtles.
ask if you were influenced by like the Larry Hama, Real American Hero, all that
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I have an autographed copy of the silent issue,
Oh, cool.
and
That's
I
amazing.
I'm just, if you don't know what the silent issue is, I will give you the joy of googling it and
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
for it. It's GI Joe number 21.
yeah.
Um,
It's amazing issue. It's
yes,
a master Larry Hama doing his thing,
yes,
man. So okay, cool. So you were influenced by Hama and GI Joe, and so
right,
I
yep.
remember seeing issue one last year. Are we going to see issue two or any other ones this year?
Yeah. So now what I've got. I was just holding up issue one. I've got a prequel.
Oh, okay.
So
Issue
this is
zero.
this is
Okay.
book zero, and this is a little bit of an origin story,
Okay.
and it talks about one of the characters. And then I've got book two.
Oh, okay.
So book two is still, it's fully, it's fully lettered. Like if we got into it, you can see all the
Mhm.
lettering on the pages, so you
Yeah.
can read it, but it's the pencil art
Okay.
inside. So book two is about half colored right now.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll make the October show, but
Okay.
because I'm not doing the coloring. My buddy, guy named Jeremy Shepard, he does the coloring, and he's a former, he colored in Rob Liefeld's studio Extreme.
Oh, okay.
for Image, and then he also did work on X-Men because
No.
he was one of the colors for a group known as Liquid Color.
Okay, that's
And so
great.
he's man, he is it's just it just it just levels up the book.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
All
love
right.
that.
Well, we'll
And then
look
I've
forward to that.
also
I'm sorry, go ahead.
also got book three,
Oh, okay. How
and
far along is book three?
so book three is fully drawn, lettered, and again just needs to be colored.
Okay.
So yeah, you can buy and read the entire 4 issue miniseries. Book zero, book one are fully colored, ready to go. Book two, I hope to have colored by the time the show rolls around, and then book three will probably still be in the same state that it's in.
Okay. Well, definitely people need to stop by. They'll check out those. If they didn't come to Casa last year and pick up issue one will be there for y'all to pick up as well.
Yep.
But also, we got into your game making a little bit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your card game that you'll have?
Yeah. So I've produced a card game, and I don't know that these are still going to be around, but the game is called Front Toward Enemy,
Okay.
and that's based on a type of they call it a claymore mine that the military uses. It's a nasty little thing, but it literally says on it "Front Toward Enemy," so you know how to position it. And what I did was I took the game of war and added additional ways to battle. So
Okay.
you're not just sitting there flipping cards, going high card. Oh, you
Yeah.
won. High card. Oh, I won. High.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of strategy, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but this is
Yeah, I can see the symbols and stuff. Hmm.
so you still play highest card. It's a full deck of cards.
Okay.
Um, but then what you do is you the next ones, I don't know if it's got a glare on it, but the next game is, I call it gun range,
Okay.
and you want your pistol to line up to an opponent's target. So if you put the cards head to head to do battle,
Ah,
um, you can see both of these cards the guns miss,
yeah.
but that's okay if there's no hit, then you go to the next game on the card.
Okay.
Then you play high dice. Then you play death dealer, and then you play rock paper scissors. So the
Okay.
cards have rock paper
Yeah.
scissors on it, but it's meant to be a quick game and different ways to play battle with a deck of cards, where
Yeah.
it's not always just high card, high card, high card.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully you'll have some of those at Casa. If not, then I'm happy that you sold out and made your money. So,
Oh no! What I was gonna say is I think I'm gonna sell out because this was a limited edition of 80 decks,
okay.
but I will absolutely have the latest version of that. And I'm thinking of doing like some different colorways
Okay.
so that I can, maintain low print runs and do numbered decks
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
keep everything super cool.
That'd be cool. Cool, man. So
And
definitely I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say the last thing I want to mention that I also do is I'm the illustrator for these books called Violent but True Bedtime Stories.
Okay.
And this is in association with a local company called Grunt Style.
Oh yeah, the t-shirt company,
And
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, the t-shirt company. So the co-owner of Grunt Style is also a big comic book fan,
Okay.
and he wanted to do something cool, with like telling the true stories of, in this case, Herschel Williams was a Marine on Iwo Jima, and he's a
Okay.
Medal of Honor recipient.
Okay.
And so this book retells his actions from World War II.
Okay.
And then here's volume three,
Okay.
and this is another Marine.
All right.
Um,
And you'll have those at Casa this
so
October?
I will have some of those at Casa as well.
Well, that's great, man. Then the people can
Yeah.
find lots of stuff. Remember, if you stop by Casa, you can find Seals, all 4 issues of Seals. You can find Carl's card game. You can find Carl's violent but true bedtime stories. So there'll be plenty of stuff for you. But before we wrap up, Carl, if people want to follow you online or upcoming projects, where would they find you?
The best place would probably be Instagram,
Okay.
and my handle there is at Carl Braun Creative.
Okay.
I do have a website, studioaresdesign.com.
Okay.
I'm still working on that. And I mean, as you can imagine, when I've got free time, it's like, do I work on Violent but True or Seals or the card
Yeah.
game? And I've got some other card games,
Yeah.
that I'm working on as well. But,
Yeah, that's always
I,
the thing, right? Time, trying to find time for all the
yep.
ideas.
Yeah.
So,
Time management. It's
yeah.
awesome.
Cool, man. Well, thank you for joining us, Carl. Everybody come out and see Carl. Carl is has been gracious enough to be one of our sponsors for CASA. So he'll be towards the front of the convention there against the wall. Thank you so much, Carl. Thanks to you and the other sponsors, we're able to put on this show that hopefully really puts the focus on comic books, comic creators, and that kind of
Yes.
stuff.
Yep.
So October 5th at the Marriott San Antonio Airport.
All right. I
Well,
can't wait. I'm looking forward to it.
well, thank you so much for joining us again, Carl, and thank you for joining me today for a chat.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. And I love what CASA stands for and what you guys are doing. So
Hey, thank
let
you
me
so
know how I
much.
can help, man.
Yeah, no
All
problem.
right.
You have a great one.
All right. You too, Nasser. Thank you.
Bye.